Good morning, and I just want to take a few minutes and kind of talk to you about what we were going to talk about in our Synchronous session last night when Mrs. Cedarberg sounded like a teacher from a Charlie Brown cartoon. Sorry about that. Thankfully, I found a microphone that works, so yay for that. So let's kind of dive in and see what our next step, what the next phase of this project is. So now we have direction. I think everybody has a question, a topic, and again, those are not necessarily set in stone. So as we work, we might refine those as we go. But that question that you've submitted gives you a direction. So now that we have a direction, now we needed to figure out how we're going to collect that data. And that's what we're getting ready to do in this part of the course. So we're going to start looking at the methods section. So what is the methods section of your research? Well, method. When you see the word method, what do you think of? Okay, yes, method is how you do something. So basically the method section is how am I going to do my research? And there's several different pieces to the method section. We'll call them subsections. And we're going to work through each of those subsections individually. So the first subsection we're going to work through is the research design. And there are multiple ways to design research. I want us to work on keeping it simple. As you go through the content in the module for this first part of the method section module, it's all about research design. There's probably a lot more information there than you need. And I want you to know that as you're doing this, that recall the purpose of the research you're doing. Always keep your question at hand. So as you're designing your research, say, okay, here's my question. What design framework will best help me answer that question? It can be simple. In fact, I think for this it should be simple. But you have choices on a quantitative study, which focuses mostly on numbers. You have a qualitative study that focuses on experiences and perceptions. And then there's the mixed methods, which is a combination of both of them. You use both numbers and experiences and perceptions. And the data is collected a little differently for both of those. Okay? Quantitative, think of pre-test, post-test. Think of surveys with Likert or Likert, however you say that, scales, like 1 through 5, almost always, sometimes, never, all of those kind of choices. Qualitative, that's quantitative, right? Another way quantitative is keeping tallies of how often people express a behavior or attendance numbers compared to behavior numbers, those kind of things. So we're comparing numbers. Correlation studies do that a lot, and you'll causal comparison. So these two things, causes, how do they compare to each other? Descriptive studies, we'll use that, quantitative, and you'll learn more about each of those as you go through the content this week. Then there's the qualitative, okay, that collects data by using interviews. The responses of people from interviews. It uses observations, observation data. What did you see? We call those field journals. You go out and you watch what's going on and you take notes. Okay, qualitative information. And then the mixed methods uses the both of those and says, okay, here's what my numbers said. Here's what the qualitative piece said. When I put those together, what do I see? What comes from that? And so as we're doing our research, we are doing, we're using an action research book. We are kind of doing a modified action research. We are doing kind of it is action research, but it's also educational research. We're kind of mixing the two together. Just because that's the way I see action research. And as we read through what the content of the text says, does that as well. As you read, it talks about research designs, and it talks about, using good surveys and being ethical and all of that kind of thing that we're going to talk about. And then when you read the examples in the book don't really follow all that. And so I'm not using the examples in the book. I'm giving examples from other sources because I want us to do research that's, I won't say good research, a little more traditional, but also has that action research feel. And we've got the action research feel because I want you to focus on your own immediate where you are right now. That's the big difference between action research and traditional research. Action research says, I have a problem in this room right this minute. I want to figure out how to solve it. Or there's something going on in my school building that I want to see if I try this intervention or this strategy, it's going to make a difference somehow, good, bad, or otherwise. And because of that good, bad, or otherwise reaction or result, I'm going to then do this. And it's going to kind of keep going. Okay, so I'm going to tweak it. I'm going to try this. Okay, that worked this way. What if I tweak it this way? And we'll do it again and keep going. Regular traditional research says, okay, there's this big, broad problem that I want to see if I can solve for lots of people. And we're going to generalize it for lots, for the population. Action research, you can't do that because it's just strictly focused on a very small sample within your classroom. It could be a single individual. It just depends on what you've chosen to look at, what your question is. So we're really going to look at research design as, okay, it's that simple, what's the simplest way I can design my study and get the answers to the questions that I need. Doesn't have to be big, elaborate. Just think of it that way. Look at your question. What's the simplest way I can design my study to get the answers that I need? And again, one more clarification with the action research. As you're in the content this week, you're going to see that a couple of the presenters talk about action research as a qualitative research design. One of them talks about action research as a mixed methods research design. I want you to ignore those comments about action research. Action research is actually its own thing. There's traditional research, there's action research. Action research focuses on the smaller, non-generalizable population. You're looking at a problem of practice is really what you're doing. And how can you help to either solve that problem or find a way to improve what's going on with that problem, change what's going on with that problem. Okay? It's immediate. Action research is immediate because it requires some kind of action. Traditional research is not necessarily immediate. It can be a long-term study that goes on and on because they're looking for answers to a question that would impact a broader population. So keep that in mind as you're going through the research design content. The next piece of the method section is the participants, and that's who's going to be part of the study. And when we really get into that piece and writing that piece, you'll find out that we need it to be specific enough, or we need to be specific, but not so specific that we might be able to pick out individual students or individual adults, just individuals in general. We want to be able to say, okay, there were 25 males and 4 females. Okay, that's cool. And this study was conducted in a rural elementary school in western Kansas. That's cool. What I don't want to see will be the study was conducted at Fairlawn Elementary School in Skyline, Kansas. That's too specific. Okay, so we want it to be specific but general. And I'll give you some examples to kind of see how that's going to work. But we really want to fully describe, richly describe who the participants are in our study. So that'll be our next piece of the methods puzzle. Okay, and then after that, we're going to talk about what am I going to use to collect my data, the instrumentation. So what's that going to look like? Am I going to use a pre-test and a post-test? Am I going to use a survey of some kind? If I do an interview, what are my interview questions going to look like? Maybe I'm going to do observations. So what, will I take field notes? Maybe I will use a focus group to do interviews, or will I do individual interviews? Maybe I'm just going to keep what I call occurrence tallies. I'm sure there's a much better word for that. And anything else that we might use. Am I going to use attendance records? Am I going to use grades? Am I going to use some kind of report that comes from my, for those of you who are school nurses, that comes from the system that we use? So it's just that, what am I going to use to collect my data? And after we figure that out, so we know our design, we know who's going to be part of the study, we know what we're going to use to collect the data. Now we need to know how we're going to collect the data. So we're going to do a step-by-step procedure for how data is going to be collected. So we'll start it out, and I'll probably have you just do it in bullet points. Okay? Here's what I'm going to do, or even a numbered list. Okay? This will be first, second, third, and just do that. And then we'll take that and we'll write that in the narrative. And we're going to be specific enough that if I pick up your procedure, I could walk down the hall, across the room, and I could do that myself. So, and another bullet, okay, so I want to be specific enough that somebody else could replicate it, but I don't want to give so much detail that it's like 6-7 pages long and nobody just wants to like plod through that. So keep all that in mind. As we get to the procedure, we'll work on that. Knowing that, we're going to say, here is how I'm going to collect my data. All right. So we've got the design. We know who's going to be part of the study. We know what instruments we're going to use to collect the data. We know how we're going to collect the data. We have a plan, a procedure for collecting the data. Now we want to say, okay, what might get in the way? As part of the research design process, you're going to define some variables. The limitations talks about other variables other than the one you defined for your question that could get in the way, that could affect your question, but it's not part of your study. So we'll look at limitations a little more closely, obviously, when we get there. But just as you're working and as you're writing and thinking about your methods and how you're going to do things, if something comes to mind, oh, that might be something that would limit my study, jot it down. And as we're doing each of these pieces, if you think of something that, like with the participants, oh, I need to make sure I include this piece about my participants, jot it down somewhere, so that as you get ready to do each section, you've got your information around. Because sometimes it comes to you, you're like, oh yeah, I need to do that. Or I need to make sure that I note that so I include it in that section of my study. So limitations. What variables might possibly impact the outcome of my question that I didn't plan for? And then the final piece of the methods is how in the world am I going to analyze this data that I collected? What tests am I going to use? What statistics? And there's some possibilities over here on the right. Okay. Descriptive statistics, like means, medians, standard deviation, things that are going to describe my sample, my population, my participants, how that relates to the results, maybe of pre-tests and that kind of thing. There's a t-test, and we'll talk about that. T-test compares means. So you have two variables, and they're independent of each other, and you say, okay, how did one affect the other? And so you use a t-test. Maybe we're doing a correlation study, and you want to see how, if one variable correlates with another, we'll do Pearson's correlation. For qualitative data, do some thematic coding, which can be as much as we write, where we have to transcribe our interviews, and we say, okay, after we've got all the transcription, we've got all in one place, Then we start going through and see if we see common words, common ideas, common themes emerge. I'll show you that we can use Wordle, word clouds, to kind of look up for themes, and some other ways to do that thematic coding when we get to the data analysis. But those will be some things that we need to know before we collect data. Now, you won't have to know how to do it. You just need to know what test you're going to use. And then we'll do those tests after the data has been collected. So, and we have the data analysis. So, all of the pieces, I'm saying so a lot today, I apologize. We have all of our pieces of our method section. We're going to do each piece one at a time. And after we get done with each piece, when we're ready to do the whole paper, what I'll give you is I'll give you kind of a framework. And I'll say, here's what your final submission should look like. Here's the pieces. What should go in this section, et cetera, et cetera. You'll have each piece done, and you can just drop it in to that, I'll call it a template, and you'll have your whole paper ready to go. And we're going to do that one piece at a time. So I know I already talked about it a little more earlier, but our first step then is the research design section. That's what we're getting ready to step into. Some of you may have already started exploring the content that's up in the module right now. And what I wanted us to do last night is I wanted us to get together within your groups and actually talk about what is your focus. And then what do you think your research design might be? Just to bounce ideas off each other, because sometimes it's nice to be able to do that. So if you would like in your group, in your study group, do that. Send each other messages back and forth and say, hey, what did you decide to do? And how do you think you're going to design? What design do you think you might use? Bounce ideas off of each other. Okay, don't be out there floundering by yourself going, oh my gosh, I have no idea. I mean, do I want to do qualitative? Do I want to do quantitative? Maybe I want to do mixed methods. And am I doing a pre-test, post-test? Or am I doing a causal comparison? What am I doing? I just don't know. Okay, don't do that to yourself. Use each other. That's why I put you in groups, so that you've got this small nucleus of people that you can say, hey, here's where I'm at. Can you help me out? Or can you give me an idea? And so if you would, answer these questions in a message to your fellow study group people. What is your research focus? What did you decide to do? I mean, I'm curious. And then, or here's what I'm doing. Here's what I decided to do, and I think I want to approach it as a quantitative or whatever, and here's why I think so, and then give each other feedback. So as you go through the content, because somebody else might say, wait, I think it would be easier if you did it this way. Have you thought about that? So let's use each other, okay, for this piece. Now, I don't want you to send me this information in this question. And here's why. Because what I want you to do, I want you to use the information you've been given and anything else you find. And I want you to try on your own and with the aid of your study group to craft this section, the research design section, on your own. There's some help. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And I want you to submit that. And then what's going to happen is then I'm going to read everybody's, I'm going to give you feedback. And I'll tell you one way or the other, okay, this looks good. Have you considered this design? Now, I might not need to do that. And that's fine. But if I do. So when I send the feedback for this section, this 1 or 2 paragraphs that you're going to submit, I want you to take that feedback, I want you to think about it, and I want you to make any changes that are suggested. And after you get feedback from me on this, and then you want to ask a question about the feedback. Okay, now you like, Ms. Hudeberg, you said that what I had looked good, but you also suggested this, and after some consideration and some more looking, I think I want to stick with my original. Is that okay? Well, I'll be good with that. Or you could say, I looked at it and you're right. I think maybe that would be easier. So what would be the best way to word that? So I can help you with that after that. But I don't want to do it here initially. Initially, I want you to do this yourself, then submit it, and we'll work through that together following your submission, okay? All right, so use your group, talk to each other, bounce ideas off each other, put your section together, and to help you do that, I've created what's called a research design checklist. And that research design checklist looks like this. Okay, it says, it's a tool that's going to help you make some decisions. And when you first start, there's a little survey that you'll go through. And it says, you choose A or B, but maybe you want to choose both. That's quite all right. You go through, how many responses? Okay, so should I do qualitative, should I do quantitative? All right. And then you'll go, whoops. Whoa. All right. Then the next step is, okay, what overall design am I going to use? So you've answered that, so you can go, okay, I'm going to click, or I'm going to put an X in quantitative or mixed merit. Okay, so now what are my variables? So you've gone through the content, you got your book. Okay, my variables are, so, write out your variables. What are they? Extraneous variables are those things that might limit your study. So we want to talk about those a little bit too. So we want to write them down so that we kind of know what they are. Okay. You might not have any. I don't know. Then you're going to, so maybe you're doing quantitative, non-experimental, okay? So I'm doing the last one, quasi-experimental. So I can mark that, and you might even get right down there a little more detail. I should have put an other or a descriptive there. You can add a little description in there. Okay. Maybe you're doing experimental design. I don't know. Maybe you're doing qualitative. Maybe you're doing mixed methods. And it says here mixed methods will be a combination of quantitative and qualitative. So you'll have one of these and one of these, right, that you'll put together. And then why? So why is that what you chose? So kind of write a few sentences here, and they don't have to flow together. But what's my rationale? And where did you get the information for your rationale? Okay, I'm going to turn the page here. And then what's your role going to be in the investigation? And then you're going to take all that information from step 2, and then step 3 is actually to write that rich description of your research design. So take all the information that you've got in step 2, and now pull that in to some good cohesive sentences that tells me about exactly what your research design is. And I've also given you some examples to see. So you've got this checklist to kind of help you, okay, mark, okay, I need to make this, and here's what my variables are, and here's what my design might look like after I've decided whether it's qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods. Here's why I chose that and what that is. So now I can take that information and I can plug that over in and actually write the design section. Now you will not turn in this checklist. This checklist is a tool for you. You will submit just the rich description of your research design as you want it to appear in your research study. So step 3 is all you're going to turn in. You're not going to turn in the whole checklist. Okay? Very good. So I hope that you, see if I can get there, are more comfortable now with the method section and the direction we're going to go and what I want you to do in this first part of the module. If you have questions, please list those questions in the methods section discussion board. And this video is posted in our Synchronous meeting area. It's also part of a discussion board within the methods section module. So if you have a question, please post those questions in that discussion board so that we can all see them and I can answer them and we can all see those answers as well. All right, so are you ready? Set, go.